help others, like, subscribe, and ring the bell for notifications.
Shalom, I'm at home in Israel, overlooking a large part of Jerusalem from my window, and a beautiful day today, sunny, hardly any clouds in the sky. And I'm continuing now the second session of dealing with the Torah portion of Exodus. The Torah portion starts in chapter 1 and ends later. And part of that Torah portion is very, very important. And I spent a lot of time on Sunday dealing with the daughter of Pharaoh and why she went to the river Nile to bathe, and why her handmaids that were accompanying her didn't get in the water. She's the only one got in the water. I dealt with that. But today I discovered something that I never saw before. I never heard anybody else talk about it before. And it's in the book of First Chronicles. First Chronicles, chapter 4, verse 18. It's a big discovery that actually proves that what I was saying on Sunday about the daughter of Pharaoh going in the water of the Nile in order to purify herself in her month is true. How do I know it's true? Now I have a textual proof from the Bible that it's true. This is what it says in First Chronicles chapter 4, verse 18. I'm going to go there now and come back to Exodus a little bit later. First Chronicles chapter 4, verse 18. I need to go out of the program where I am and go back to the Bible, the whole Bible, and then talk about what I discovered. First Chronicles chapter 4. First Chronicles chapter 4. Why am I not getting what I'm looking for? And I'm going to look for it, I guess, in another way. Oh. Okay, well, I need to get out of there and go to a new search. Chapter 4, verse 18. And I want to find it. Okay, we have a genealogy here. The whole chapter is a genealogy of the tribes and the families. And then in verse 18, it says like that, and his Yehudit Judahite wife, and his Judahite wife bore Jared, father of Gedor, Heber, father of Socho, and Yekutiel, father of Zanoach. These were the sons of Batia, the daughter of Pharaoh, whom Mered married. Well, now we know the name of the bat of the bat. Well, now we know the name of the daughter of Pharaoh. Her name is Batia. Very, very Jewish name. Very, very holy name. And fitting her character. Why? The name Batia means daughter of God. God's daughter. Bat is daughter. Yah is the Lord. God. It's a short form of Jehovah. So we have here the name of the daughter of Pharaoh and the names of her children, and that lends itself to what I was saying on Sunday. It lends itself that before she found Moses floating in the Nile, she already received the laws of the Jews, and that's why she went to the river to purify herself in running water and not in still water. And that's why her handmaids did not enter the water with her. It was a private moment when she found the basket that was sealed with pitch to make it waterproof with the baby Moses inside, and she says, "This is a Hebrew child." How would she, the daughter of Pharaoh who grew up in the palace and didn't slum down to the slave department of the city of On? So that now he explains it. Why she knew that the baby was Jewish, and why she went into the water by herself, and why her handmaid didn't go in there with her. All of these things now fill the picture with this text that gives us the name of the daughter of Pharaoh, Batia, the daughter of God. Good. But we want now to continue our study. And in order to continue our study, we need to go to the book of Exodus, not the book of First Chronicles, but the book of Exodus. Okay, that was an interesting kind of tidbit that adds to the picture. It adds to the picture also that according to Jewish tradition, she left Egypt together with the children of Israel and crossed the sea, the Red Sea, on dry ground with the rest of the children of Israel, and came back to the land of Israel and married, according to this text in Chronicles, married and had children in Israel. So all of these things are for me, they're fascinating and important. And I want to go now back to the book of Exodus and to the end of chapter 3. Yeah. No, the beginning of chapter 3 of the book of Exodus. And it starts with the words, "Now Moses was tending the flock of his father-in-law, Jethro. The priest of Midian drove the flock into the wilderness and came to Horeb, the mountain of God." That's the first verse of chapter 3 of Exodus. We are still in the weekly portion of Shemot. So we find out Moses ran away from Egypt because he killed the Egyptian taskmaster because he was beating up the Jew, the Israelite, and he ends up as a servant, a shepherd of sheep, of a pagan priest who becomes his father-in-law because he marries Zipporah, the daughter of Jethro, the priest of Midian. Now, one of the things that we know from the Bible and also from history and also from archaeology is that the Egyptians didn't like shepherds of sheep or goats. First of all, goats were among their gods, but they didn't like shepherds of sheep or goats. But Moses, who was raised in the palace of the Pharaoh, an Egyptian child of the daughter of Pharaoh, is now a shepherd serving a pagan priest, a Midianite priest. Midian, most of the biblical history, was the enemy of Israel. You can read it in the book of Judges, you can read it later and before, that they were not exactly friendly with Moses and with the children of Israel when they were coming into the land. So Moses is chasing a sheep, lost sheep, in the Mount of Horeb, Mount Sinai, and suddenly he sees something strange. He sees the angel of the Lord, the messenger of God, appears to him from a burning bush. And he sees the bush burning in fire, but it is not being burned out. It's a fire that is, I would call it a cold fire from the burning bush. And Moses is inquisitive and he goes to see what is happening with this burning bush, why it is not being consumed. Moses speaks to himself in verse 3 of chapter 3. Moses says, I must turn aside to look at this marvelous sight. Why does the bush not burn up? And so he goes up to the bush that's not being burned up, but there is a fire in it. And when God sees he had turned aside to look, Moses had turned aside to look, God called to him out of the bush, Moshe, Moshe. And Moses answered, Here I am. Vayomer, God said to him, Don't come close. Take off your shoes from your legs, from your feet, because the place that you are standing now, standing upon a place that is holy ground. Let me take this idea a little further. Any place that God is there, that God stands in it, that God sits in it, that God sleeps in it, any place that has the presence of God automatically is a holy ground. A little homework for you. Look in a concordance, or if you have an iPad or an iPhone or a computer, look for the word holy ground. And see how few times in the whole Bible this phrase appears. Because the rule is if God is there, the place is holy. Interesting caveat on this is in 1 Kings chapter 8, where there is the dedication of Solomon is dedicating the temple that he built, the temple to God that he built in Jerusalem. And he says something very interesting. God doesn't dwell in this place. You know what? Instead of paraphrasing it from my memory, let me go there and read the text for you because it's a text that applies a lot to the New Testament, especially to Paul's sermon on Mount, on the hill of Areopagus in Athens, when he speaks to the judges in Athens, in chapter 17 of the book of Acts. So I'm going to verse 15 of 1 Kings 8. He said, Solomon, praise be the eternal, the God of Israel, who has fulfilled with deeds the promise made by my father David. For God said, ever since I brought my people of Israel out of Egypt, I have not chosen a city among all the tribes of Israel for building a house where my name might abide. But I have chosen David to rule my people Israel. Now my father David had intended to build a house for the Lord, for the name of the Lord, the eternal, one God, the God of Israel. But God said to my father David, as regards to your intention to build a house for my name, you did right to have that intention. However, you shall not build the house yourself. Instead, your son, the issue of your loins, shall build the house for my name. And God has fulfilled the promise that was made, and I have succeeded my father David, and I have ascended the throne of Israel as God promised. I have built the house for the name of the Eternal One, the God of Israel, and I have set a place there for the ark containing the covenant that God made with our ancestors upon the bringing them out from the land of Egypt. Then Solomon stood before the altar of the God in the presence of the whole community of Israel. He spread the palms of his hands toward heaven and said, O eternal God of Israel, in heavens and above and on earth below, there is no God like you, who keep your gracious covenant with your servants when they walk before you in wholehearted devotion. You who have kept the promise you made it to your servant my father David, fulfilling with deeds the promise you made, as is now the case. And now, O eternal God of Israel, keep the further promise that you made to your servant, my father David. Your line on the throne of Israel shall never end if only your descendants will look to their way and walk before me, as you have walked before me. Now, therefore, O God of Israel, let the promise that you made to your servant, my father David, be fulfilled. But will God really dwell on earth? Even the heavens of the heavens and to their utmost reaches cannot contain you. How much less this house that I have built? Yet turn, my eternal God, to the prayer and the supplication of your servant, and hear the cry and prayer of your servant offers before you on this day. May your eyes be open day and night toward this house, toward this place which you have said, my name shall abide there. May you heed the prayers of your servant will offer toward this place. And when you hear the supplications that your servant and your people Israel offer toward this place, give heed to your heavenly abode, give heed and pardon. Whenever one of our one whenever one person commits an offense against another, and the latter utters an infraction to bring cure upon the former, and comes with an infraction before you, your altar in this house. O hear in heaven, and take action to judge your servants, condemning the one who is in the wrong and bringing down the punishment of their conduct on their head, while vindicting the other who is in the right by rewarding them according to your righteousness. I'm going to stop reading here the words of Solomon when he's dedicating the temple. But as you see, Solomon says so clearly that God, yes, this is the house of God. It's a prayer for prayer and supplication, and God is asking God to hear the prayers of the people of Israel, to forgive their sins when they confess, and so forth. But this is a symbol. God doesn't really dwell in that house, not in heaven and not in the heavens of heaven, but above all is his abode. I would add, the implication is it dwells everywhere, but not the house is for the people, not for God as a house to permanently move his furniture and his shoes and his socks to this place. So this is an interesting thing, because back to Moses in the book of Exodus, what do we see? That God said that spot on Mount Sinai, where that burning bush is burning and not being consumed, is a holy ground, and tells Moses, take your shoes off because you're standing on a holy ground. The implications of this is very important, because wherever God is holy. If God is in Sinai, is holy. If he's in Jerusalem, he's holy. If he's in Timbuktu, if he lands in Timbuktu, Timbuktu will be holy. That is a principle that we all need to understand. Nobody can can God in a can of star-kissed tuna. We can't, Gott mit uns, like the Germans said before World War II. God is with us. No, God is with his children. And when God is in his children are sanctified. Like in Leviticus 19. Today we don't have a temple. In the place of a temple there is the abomination of desolation. That's what is there now. Jews are forbidden even by the rabbis to go and pray there, not only by the Muslims and the Muslim Waqf authority. But we're not without God. even though we don't have a temple. And we're not without God's presence in our life, because where two or three are gathered together and they are talking and praying to God in the name of Yeshua, God is there with them. That's what Yeshua taught. Where two or three are gathered, the Jews talk about having 10 men. If 10 men are praying together, God's presence is there with them. But in the New Testament, it's not 10 men. Where two or three are gathered, I'll be with you, Yeshua said. So, holy spot. And why is the place where the burning bush is holy and Moses had to take his shoes off? It's because God was there. He was in the flames of that burning bush that is not being consumed. So I have to go back to the book of Exodus and go back to chapter 3. What happens there in front of the burning bush? The first thing that Moses goes is inquisitive, he's curious, so he's walking toward the burning bush. The first thing that God tells him, don't get closer. Take your shoes off, because the place that you're standing is holy. And then God identifies himself. This is very important. God says in verse 6, I am the God of your fathers, the God of Abraham, the God of Isaac, and the God of Jacob. What does Moses do? He hides his face with whatever cloth he had there from God. Why? He was afraid to look at God. That's true not only here. In every occasion that Moses was conversing with God, fear engulfed him. Not fear that is negative, fear that is holy, fear that is inspiring and empowering. There are few moments in my life that I had that kind of fear. I don't know. I imagine God is everywhere, so He was there too. It was in the library in Escorial in Spain, when I asked the priest. Second day, first day he wasn't there, so I asked the nuns. The nuns didn't have the authority or the key to open what I asked to see. And I asked the priest, I made an appointment with the nurses that the priest will be there at 10 o'clock the next morning. And I went there and I asked for him to open the glass case in which there was one of the most beautiful early medieval manuscript of the Hebrew Bible. And each page was illuminated. Illuminated means it was decorated by artists around the text with gold and with silver and with colors and flowers. And when the priest opened that glass case, inside a Catholic monastery, inside a Catholic library, inside a Catholic church, the building, standing in front of that manuscript, I felt that I'm standing in front of something holy. Every Bible is holy, but that Bible that somebody labored, I don't know how long, how much, if he did it alone or there were others helping him, but that Bible inspired me. The very idea that somebody decorated every page beautifully with art inspired me. It was a very crucial day for me because on that day I received the right to publish the book of the wisdom of God, which was a Hebrew manuscript, medieval Hebrew manuscript. I haven't done that yet, but I hope to be given life enough to do it. But I have the whole manuscript photographed, microfiche uh, photography of the text in color. Yes, it's awe-inspiring to be in the presence of something that you feel is holy. And Moses was that way, and that moment changed his life. Till that moment, Moses was a fugitive from the Egyptian law. From that moment, Moses was no longer a fugitive from the Egyptian law. He was appointed by God to be, if I use modern legal terminology, he got the power of attorney by God himself to represent God in front of Pharaoh and all of Egypt, and of course to all of Israel. The guy that was a fugitive in one moment becomes the authority on earth for Israel and for the world until today to represent the God that created the heavens and the earth. The God so loved the world that he sent his only begotten Son so that no one will perish eternally, but everyone has a chance for eternal life. At that one moment, I don't know how long it took, minutes, seconds, 20 minutes, half an hour, I have no idea how long it took. But I imagine it didn't take too long for God to appoint Moses to be his authority in this physical earth. And then God commissions Moses in verse 7 and says, and God continued, I have marked well the plight of my people in Egypt and have heeded their outcry because of their taskmasters. Yes, I am mindful of their suffering. I have come down to rescue them from the Egyptians and to bring them out of that land to a good and spacious land, a land flowing with milk and honey, the region of the Canaanites, the Hittites, the Amorites, the Perizzites, the Hivites, and the Jebusites. And now in the 21st century, in this month of January 2025, I'll read the list of the nations that God mentions after he says that the land is the land of milk and honey. The Canaanites, the Hittites, the Amorites, the Perizzites, the Hivites, the Jebusites, and now Joseph Shulam, by the authority of God, is adding also the Philistines. Not only the Philistines that lived here, that came from Crete to the land of Israel, but by the Palestinians. I'm taking that privilege as a servant of God to say I'm adding to the Perizzites, Hivites, Canaanites, Amorites, and Hittites, the Philistines. After what happened on the 7th of October 2023, I think that the righteous thing to happen is for Israel to put into that list of the nations that no longer exist also those people who did the atrocity and the evil and the bestiality of October 7th, 2023. Because the land that these people, the Canaanites and the Hittites and the Amorites and the Perizzites and the Hivites and the Jebusites possessed in the days of Moses and Joshua, includes also Gaza and all the region all the way to Rafiah, to the river of Egypt, which is the border that God gave to Israel more than one time. So Moses comes down of the mountain, a changed human being, a changed man, and God tells him, "Go down, Moses, represent me in front of Pharaoh and Egypt." In verse 11, Moses says, "But Moses said to God, who am I that I should go to Pharaoh and free the Israelites from Egypt? Who am I?" This is so Jewish. It's so Jewish. You know, the Jew thinks he's the king of the world. If he's got $5 in his pocket, he's the king of the world. But he will still say, "Who am I? I'm nothing." Yeah, poor me. Even if he had $1 billion in the bank, he'd still say, "I'm nothing. I'm poor me. What am I? Who am I?" So here you've got this already starting with Moses. Uh, Me ani? Who am I that I will go to Pharaoh? And God says to him, "I will go with you, and I will be with you, that shall be your sign that it was I who sent you. When you have freed the people from Egypt, you shall worship God at this very mountain." And Moses says to God, "But what? I'm coming back to the people of Israel, and I will tell them, God of your father sent me, and they will tell me, what's his name? What shall I tell them? I don't know who you are." All the Egyptian God, the Canaanite God, the Hittite God, they all have names. They all have identity. They all have, you know, their own temple, their own priest. What am I coming with? I've got nothing in my hand. God says again to Israel, to Moses, in verse 15, "Thus shall you speak to the Israelites, Jehovah, the God of your fathers, the God of Abraham, the God of Isaac, and the God of Jacob, has sent me to you. This shall be my name forever. This my appellation for all eternity. Go, assemble the elders of Israel, and say to them, Jehovah, Yud Hey Vav Hey, the Tetragrammaton, the God of your fathers, the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, has appeared to me and said, I have taken note of you and of what you are being is no. I'm, I have taken note of you and of what is being done to you in Egypt. And I have declared, I will take you out of the misery of Egypt to the land of Canaanites, Hittites, Amorites, Perizzites, Hivites, Jebusites, a land flowing with milk and honey. And they will listen to you. And then you shall go with the elders of Israel to the king of Egypt and shall say to him, Yud-Heh-Vav-Heh, Jehovah, the God of the Hebrews, became manifest to us. Now therefore let us go a distance of 3 days into the wilderness to sacrifice to our God, Jehovah. Yet I know that the king of Egypt will let you go only because of a greater might. So I will stretch out my hand and smite Egypt with various wonders, which I will work upon them. After that, he shall let you go. I read up to this verse, to verse 20, for this reason. What is God saying to Moses here? These people don't understand anything except power, force. They're not going to let you go if you beg them, if you give them money, if you nice to them. Only with force they shall let you go. And verse 21, I will dispose of the Egyptian favorably toward this people, so that when you go, you will not go away empty-handed. In other words, I'll make sure that you come out from Pharaoh's presence with something in your hand. And Moses says, they're not going to believe in me. The Israelites are not going to believe in me. They're not going to hear my voice. They will say, God didn't appear to you. They will say, what is this? What is this in your hand? This stick that you're holding. The rod of Moses, the stick that he's holding in his hand. And God will direct me. What is this in your hand? A rod, a stick. So cast it on the ground. Throw that stick down. Cast it on the ground, and it became in the English, it became a snake. It became a snake. And then God tells Moses something very curious that everybody that has dealt with snake knows instinctively. God says to Moses, put out your hand and grasp it by the tail. But he put out his hand and seized it, and it became a rod in his hand. A stick, a stick in his hand. That they may believe that God tells him, this happened so that they will believe that God, the God of their ancestors, the God of Abraham, the God of Isaac, the God of Jacob, did appear to you. This trick with the stick will be a proof that I appeared to you. And God said to him further, put out your hand in your bosom. He put his hand in his bosom. And when he took out the hand, it was encrusted with snowy scales, which is one of the signs of leprosy. And put back his hand, came out clean again, like the rest of his body, the text says. And if they don't believe you and don't hear you, the first sign, they will believe you to the last sign. God is giving instruments to Moses to convince the Israelites first, and then the same instruments to convince Pharaoh and his servants. And verse 9 of chapter 4 says, and if they're not convinced by both of these signs that I gave you, the rod and the leprosy, and still don't heed to you, they still not believe you, don't accept you, take some water from the Nile, pour it into dry ground, and the water that you take from the Nile will turn into blood on dry ground. And the last verse that I'm going to share with you is verse 10 of chapter 4. After all these signs and the snake and the rod and the leprosy, Moses is on his own. But Moses said to God, please, on my Lord, I have never been a man of words, either in time past or now, that you have spoken to your servant. I am slow of speech and slow of tongue. And God said to him, to Moses, who created your mouth? Who makes a person dumb or deaf, seeing or blind? Is it not I, the Lord? Now go, and I will be your mouth, and I will instruct you the word that you are going to say. And Moses responds, okay, God, send whomever you are willing to send. Make whoever you want as your agent. In other words, in a way, Moses opens the door to go, but he gives God the option to choose somebody else. And God gets angry with Moses, says, and God became angry with Moses and said, there is your brother Aaron, the Levite. He, I know, speaks readily, easily. Even now he is setting out to meet you, and he will be happy to see you, and he will be happy to put words in his mouth. In other words, you shall speak to him and put words in his mouth of Aaron, and I will be with you and with him as you speak, and tell both of you what to do. I'm going to stop here. This teaching is getting long, but I hope you see both the challenges and the dramas, and the main thing is that with his disability, stuttering, insecurity, that he has an impediment in his speech, God hears it, understands it, and gives him a solution, his brother. to go with him. So there is Moses and Aaron going back to Egypt to meet Pharaoh, the Pharaoh. And all they have in their possession is the rod of Moses, the stick, the piece of wood, and Moses' disability. And I want to end with the words of Paul. When Paul complains about this physical disability, maybe his eyesight, it's a common opinion of scholars that he had problems with his eyes. When Paul complains, God answers him in 2 Corinthians, my grace is sufficient for you. And all of us who are sick and have problems, physical, spiritual, and other problems, need to remember that God's grace is sufficient for us. We have no right to complain. Because if God chooses us to do something and sends us, His grace will be with us. And it is sufficient for all of us. So God bless all of you. Continue to connect to Netivyah's webpage. Continue to be partners with what Netivyah does for the poor, for the soldiers, for the congregation, for the rest of the body of Christ in Israel and also around the world. Just one bit of news, our congregation in Curitiba, we have two congregations in Curitiba. One is led by a great painter, artist, and the other one by an engineer. And that's why they split in two. Both of them are brothers and sisters, hugging and respecting one another in peace and in comfort. And now both of them have their buildings, no longer renting, but owning a building for the congregation that are growing. So praise God for our brothers and sisters in Brazil, in Belo Horizonte, in Curitiba, in Vitoria, and our affiliates all around Brazil, South America, and Portugal, and in other countries around the world. And please pray for my health with cancer, several places with cancer in my body, and especially for Marsha's health. We need her to get back on her feet, to be able to function at least minimally, and to travel, and to go see our children and grandchildren, and stand with Israel, and stand with Netivyah, help Netivyah in Israel and Netivyah International in the States to work together and provide the needs of the body of the Messiah in Israel as a sign and a wonder for our soldiers in the field, in the north, in Judea and Samaria, and in Gaza, and help with wisdom to our government and also to the government in the United States, who's our ally and friend. In Yeshua's name, Amen.
Help others, like, subscribe, and ring the bell for notifications.